Okay, so you're here with us, and we both know why. You want to get right to the point, figure out what's really important, especially when it comes to SEO, making sure your website is set up to win in 2025 and beyond.
Right. Cut through the noise. Get those big insights.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive on technical SEO specifically, and our main source for this is going to be The Ultimate Guide to Technical SEO in 2025. Best Practices and Strategies Revealed. It's from remanagency.com.
Yeah. Great guide. Lots to unpack.
It is. It is. And I think, we can both agree that technical SEO, I always think of it as like the plumbing of your website, the stuff that's happening kind of under the hood that dictates how well search engines can find, understand, and ultimately value the content that you put so much work into.
Yeah, it's really the foundation, isn't it? You can have the most amazing content in the world,
Yeah.
but if the technical SEO is not there, if those fundamentals aren't in place, it doesn't matter how good your writing is or how beautiful your pictures are.
It's like building a house on sand. Eventually the whole thing's just going to...
Right. Exactly. And especially, as we get into 2025, search engines are getting so much more sophisticated that technical foundation is more important than ever.
And I think what's great about this guide is that it really does lay out, kind of a blueprint. It's not about turning you into a technical wizard. It's about understanding these essentials so you can make sure that your website is performing at its peak, that you're not leaving any opportunities on the table. And we want to help with that, kind of guide you through the key takeaways, the aha moments, so you walk away thinking, okay, I got this.
Exactly.
So let's start with one of the first things that this guide talks about, which is site structure and navigation. And really, it's kind of the blueprint of your website, right? Like how everything is organized. And it's easy to kind of dismiss this as just like an aesthetic thing, like, oh, it should look pretty or be easy to use. But it actually really impacts how search engines crawl and understand your content.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you think about it from the perspective of a search engine bot, it's like if you imagine you're navigating a city and the streets are kind of a confusing maze, it's going to take you a lot longer to see everything. You might miss some really important landmarks, right? Whereas a clear structure is like having a really well-organized city with clear street signs. You can get to where you want to go quickly and efficiently. And that's what we want for search engines.
And for people, right, I mean, that's the thing about this is that it's user experience goes hand in hand with how the search engines see it as well.
Absolutely. If you think about the 2025 context, how sophisticated these algorithms are getting, they really prioritize efficiency. And the guide talks about that classic 3 clicks from the homepage rule. And while it's not always a rigid thing, you must have everything within 3 clicks. The idea behind that is that important content should be easily accessible, both for users and for those bots that are crawling your site. Make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. Why make them dig through layers and layers of links?
Yeah. And it's not just about the number of clicks. It's also about the logical path, right? I mean, and the guide talks about breadcrumb navigation, which I always kind of think of as kind of helpful for users, right? You can see like where you are on the site.
Little signposts.
But it's also really valuable for search engines as well.
Yeah, it's a clear hierarchical pathway. It reinforces that structure.
Yeah.
It tells the search engines this is how these pages relate to each other. And, the example they give in the guide about the news website, I think they saw like a 25% session duration increase. Well, that's not just about the users being able to find their way around better. I think that signals to search engines, oh, hey, people are finding more relevant content. They're staying longer. That kind of engagement sends a positive signal.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have to talk about URLs, those website addresses. We tend to kind of overlook them. But the guide stresses how important it is to have consistent SEO-friendly URLs, using those relevant keywords.
And it just makes sense, right? Because in 2025, as search engines get better and better at understanding the content, that URL, it's a clear signal. It's like a label that says, this is what this page is about. It's such a simple thing to do, but it can make a big difference.
It's almost like a courtesy to the search engine.
Yeah, exactly. Make their life easier, and they'll make your life easier.
Okay, so now that we've got kind of the blueprint, we got the signposts up, let's talk about how search engines actually interact with your site. And that is crawling, rendering, and indexing. And this is kind of where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
So can you give us just like a quick rundown? Crawling, so that's like the initial visit, right? Search engine bot, like the Google bot, it comes to your site. It's following links, kind of like going through the front door, checking things out. Rendering is, it's looking at the code. It's looking at all the fancy JavaScript you might have on your site, trying to see it as we would see it in the browser. And then indexing, that's where they're actually taking that page and adding it to their massive library so that it's eligible to show up in the search results.
Yeah, exactly. And, rendering has become so much more important, I think, particularly with all these JavaScript frameworks that everyone's using now. It can be a bit of a minefield, and the guide points out some of the potential pitfalls. Like crawl errors. You can see these in Google Search Console if you're not familiar with that. It's a great free tool. Definitely go check it out. But it'll tell you if the bots are having trouble accessing your content.
And those JavaScript issues can be really tricky. I mean, you might have a beautiful website, it's all fancy, it's interactive, but if the search engine can't render it properly, it's not going to understand what it's about.
Right. It's like all style, no substance.
Yeah, exactly. So that Google mobile-friendly test, we always talk about it in terms of checking responsiveness, but it also gives you a glimpse into, how Google is actually seeing your page.
And then you've got those orphan pages. It's like the digital equivalent of a lost sock, right? It's just out there on its own, no connection to anything, no internal links pointing to it. So search engines, they rely on those internal links to discover your content. So if you've got pages that are just kind of floating out there, detached from the rest of your site, chances are they're going unnoticed.
That example in the guide, the tech blog that boosted its traffic by 30% just by fixing JavaScript navigation issues, really hits home. It's like if they can't navigate it, they can't index it, and you're basically invisible.
Yeah, absolutely. And to help with that, make sure the search engines know about your content. The guide talks about XML sitemaps and robots.txt. And these are like really important communication tools.
Yeah. So an XML sitemap, is it fair to say it's like a table of contents for your website?
Exactly. It's like saying to Google, hey, here's a list of all the important pages that we want you to know about.
It's being proactive.
Exactly. Don't just hope they find everything. Give them a map. And then robots.txt is like, setting boundaries, right? You're saying, actually, we don't want you to crawl these parts of the site.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a private area. Maybe it's some duplicate content. Or maybe it's just stuff that's not really valuable, doesn't need to be indexed.
And we keep seeing the noindex tags mentioned. So it's like, hey, you can come here, but don't actually put this in the search results, right?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you've got internal search results pages or those automatically generated pages that don't really offer much unique value. Noindex is a way to control what gets into that big Google library.
And that example they give about the sauce company that, by strategically using Noindex, they actually improve their rankings overall. It's like quality over quantity, right?
Yeah. Focus Google's attention where it matters.
Yeah.
Now we're making it easy for them to navigate. We're making sure they can find our content, understand it. Well, what about speed? I mean, in 2025, everybody's used to instant gratification online, right? If a page takes too long to load, you're gone.
Yeah. Page speed and those core web vitals, they're not just nice to have anymore, right? They're absolutely critical.
Yeah. Google has been saying this for years. A fast, user-friendly web is essential.
Yeah.
And slow loading times, they just kill your user experience. They lead to higher bounce rates. And yes, they are a ranking factor. The guide's got some great tips on what you can do to speed things up.
Image compression, it's a big one. And I'm seeing this WebP format mentioned more and more. What's the story with that?
Yeah, it's a modern image format that can really shrink those file sizes without sacrificing quality. So you get the best of both worlds.
Got it. And then minimizing those HTTP requests, that's like reducing the back and forth communication, right?
Exactly. Each time your browser has to talk to the server, it takes time. So reducing those requests speeds things up.
And lazy loading, that's getting really popular now, right?
Yeah, smart way to defer the loading of images and videos until they're actually needed. So the stuff above the fold loads quickly, and then as you scroll down, things load in dynamically.
And for those of us who, might have a global audience, CDNs, content delivery networks, they sound really important.
Yeah, especially if you've got users all over the world. A CDN basically brings your content closer to them geographically. So instead of everything having to travel from your server in, say, the US to someone in Australia, it's cached on a server closer to them.
That example in the guide about the travel website, reducing load time from, it was like 4.8 seconds down to 1.9, and then a 12% increase in conversions, that's huge. It shows that it's not just about a technical thing, it actually affects the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Speed equals conversions. Now let's move on to, something that can be a bit of a headache. Duplicate content.
Yeah, this is something that trips people up a lot.
Yeah. And the guide does a good job of explaining why it's a problem. If you've got the same content on multiple URLs, it can confuse search engines. It's like, if you go to a library and they've got 5 copies of the same book, but they're all shelved in different places, which one do you choose?
It's confusing.
Exactly. So you've got canonical tags. That's your way of saying, hey, this is the main version. This is the one we want you to focus on.
Right. So
Right.
even if it appears somewhere else, it's like a little note saying this is the original source.
Exactly. And then you've got 301 redirects. That's like a change of address form,
Mm.
right? If you've moved content from one URL to another, tell the search engines, hey, it's permanently moved here. This is the new location.
It's like forwarding your mail.
Exactly. And, even if you've only got one version of a page, the guide recommends using self-referencing canonical tags. It's basically saying, yes, this is the definitive version. There's no confusion. And then, as we talked about before, Noindex can be helpful for managing those, low-value duplicate pages.
In that example with the marketplace website, improving rankings across all those product pages just by fixing the canonicalization, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it shows that these details really matter. Now, let's move on to something that can really give you an edge in the search results, structured data, and schema markup.
Okay. And this is all about giving the search engines extra context, right? So they can really understand what's on your page.
Yeah, it's like adding labels, telling them this is a product name, this is a price, this is a review, speaking their language.
And that helps them display those rich results, right? The ones that really stand out in the search engine results pages.
Exactly. Those star ratings, FAQs, event details, they really catch the eye, and they can really boost your click-through rates.
Yeah, absolutely. And they give some good examples in the guide, like article schema for blog posts, product schema if you're selling products online, FAQ schema for question and answer pages, and review schema for showcasing customer feedback. It seems like there's a schema for pretty much everything these days.
There is, and that example with the recipe website, they implemented structured data and saw their click-through rates jump by 30% because they were getting those featured snippets.
Yeah.
It's about making your content more informative and appealing directly within those search results.
Okay, so we are in a mobile-first world. Everybody knows that. We've got our phones. We're constantly on them. So technical SEO, it's kind of inextricably linked to mobile optimization, right? And the guide talks about Google's mobile-first indexing, which means they're looking at the mobile version of your site to determine how you rank, right?
Exactly. So if your website's not optimized for mobile, you're really at a disadvantage. The guide emphasizes responsive design as a best practice, making sure that your website adapts seamlessly to different screen sizes.
And it's not just about shrinking the desktop version, right? I mean, you've got to think about touchscreens, making sure buttons are easy to tap, and avoiding those annoying pop-ups that cover the whole screen.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to optimize for touch, got to think about the user experience on a small screen. The example they give about the local business that saw a 50% increase in organic traffic after they went mobile friendly and improved their speed, that's pretty typical. Mobile optimization, it's not a nice to have anymore. It's essential.
And then for those businesses that are, looking to reach a global audience, the guide talks about international SEO and specifically green tags. And this is all about telling search engines which language, which regional version of your content is intended for which users, right?
Yeah. So if you've got, let's say, an English version of your site for US users and a Spanish version for users in Spain, reflang tags are a way of saying to Google, hey, this is the relationship between these pages.
It's like giving them the translation guide.
Exactly. And then the guy also talks about country-specific domains, like .co.uk or .de. Those can be helpful. And then the importance of content localization.
Yeah.
Not just translating it, but actually adapting it culturally.
Yeah, making sure it resonates with that specific audience.
And that example they give about the online retailer
Yeah.
that saw a 70% increase in international traffic after they implemented Make Reflang tags, that's pretty powerful. It shows you that if you get your international SEO right, it can really open up new markets.
Now, I love that they included this in the guide as a comparison table, kind of a good versus bad technical SEO. And it goes through those key areas, site structure, page speed, mobile friendliness, how you handle duplicate content, structured data, that XML sitemap, and security.
It's a great visual reminder, that if you get all these things right, you've got a solid foundation. But if you ignore them, it's like, you're building a house of cards. One gust of wind and the whole thing's going to collapse.
Yeah. And I think the big takeaway here is that, technical SEO, it's not just this like optional thing that you can kind of, maybe do later if you have time. It's fundamental. It's the prerequisite for, long-term success online.
Yeah. It impacts your ability to rank, attract the right visitors, achieve your goals, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
And I think by prioritizing those technical foundations, making sure your site's well-structured, easily crawlable, loads fast, uses structured data, is mobile-friendly, caters to your international audience. You're not just optimizing for search engines, you're optimizing for your users.
Yeah, you're optimizing for success, really, when it comes down to it.
Absolutely. So a final thought for you to ponder
Yeah.
as you go about your SEO journey. Of all the things that we've talked about today, if you had to pick one area, one thing to really focus on improving, what would it be? And what's one small step you could take today to get started?
Yeah. And remember, there are so many great resources out there to help you. Google Search Console is a fantastic free tool. You've got Moz, RF, SEMrush, Backlinko. There's tons of information. You don't have to do this alone. So go out there, make it happen. And until next time, happy optimizing.